All right.
42-27. Michigan gets it done, defeats Ohio State. The losing streak is over. Harbaugh gets it done. Aiden Hutchinson gets it done. Hassan Haskins gets it done. And Michigan's going to Indianapolis, Sam.
I told you. I told you. This went down exactly like I said it would go down. When we look back at the game, or look back at the season, last week after the Maryland game, heading into this one, I said Michigan is built. The way they're constructed, their style of play is conducive to beating Ohio State because they have the formula. They have the tools to execute the formula for beating that team. You got to be able to run the football. You got to reduce possessions. You got to keep that high-powered, high-octane unit of pass catchers off the field.
Right.
Michigan accomplished that early, and with mind-numbing repetitiveness, they pounded the rock. And you had a performance by Hassan Haskins, which I talked about. I said
legendary.
They had to have at least 200 yards rushing. I wrote that. At least 200 yards rushing to win this game. Said, hey, they don't necessarily have to go 313 Biakabatuka, but they got 300 yards. He went out and did his thing in dominant fashion. And you got contributions from Blake Corum, from Donovan Edwards. So it was a full running back contingent, but it was led by Hassan Haskins, the guy who 2 years ago on this field was the only offensive player it seemed like playing. He was the only one that really gave them an opportunity to have a chance to make that game respectable. And so you knew he was going to be ready to go in this game today. And then I said, okay, on defense, yes, they got the best collection of skill talent in the country. You know how you take it out of their hands? Pressure, burst pipes.
Absolutely.
Pressure, bust pipes, Josh Newkirk. They did that. I was about to call you Josh Gaddis, who did a hell of a job today. Hell of a job by Josh Gaddis today. But I said pressure, bust pipes. So Aiden Hutchinson was going to have to be special. If Aiden Hutchinson didn't register a single sack today, he would have gone down as one of the best defensive ends in Michigan history. With no sacks today. Now he's the best. Because these are the games that legacies are made on.
Yep.
I told you before the game, when you think Charles Woodson, when you think Desmond Howard, they had great careers, great seasons outside of Ohio State. But what do you think about when you think about those players? You think about what they did against Ohio State. Aiden Hutchinson came out and had a game-changing performance today. You had to get heat on that guy. You had to bother him. You had to disrupt him. And when you look at the end result of this game, 42-27, and the game wasn't even that close. It wasn't even that close. Every ball that bounced back in their arms. Every time they fumbled, it rolled right to them. Michigan threw it. You had a touchdown or a pass forced into coverage by Cade McNamara. He talked about it. You had an interception dropped in the red zone as well. This game wasn't even that close.
All right, let me get to the next topic. Obviously, you mentioned the 300 yards rushing. Michigan nearly 200 in the second half. But we're going to talk about something that matters to a lot of teams. Jim Harbaugh was 0-5 going into this game. There's a lot of pressure. Everyone's asking about Jim should be fired. He's not cut out for Michigan. What does this win mean for his legacy now?
He had beaten everyone in the Big Ten. This is as we talk about Jim Harbaugh and his tenure at Michigan. Everyone who talks about, he can't win the Big Ten. He hadn't won the Big Ten, right? Still hasn't, frankly. He has to win the Big Ten championship game. But he had beaten every team in the Big Ten. This was the hurdle. This was the hill to get over. And I truly think it had gotten mental. Not necessarily for him, but for the program. Sort of like Tressel and, not Tressel, but John Cooper and company back in the mid-90s. Those are great teams that it was a mental block when they faced Michigan. So you think about how close they got in 16. And I frankly don't think that the program had ever recovered from being that close.
No.
I mean, from being a yard away.
A yard away, an
a
inch
yard
away, some say, right?
Because what would the narrative be about Jim Harbaugh if they had won that game? They would have been to the playoffs. They would have won the Big Ten already, right? And then they come back in 17 and they have that game seemingly won. And a backup quarterback comes in and rescues victory from the claws of defeat. So, to me, it was about getting over the mental hump. I think part of it was his staff makeover and getting a defensive staff in here that brought some different things to the equation that the book wasn't out on, that they didn't have dissected already. From the time on task that other teams in the Big Ten had, and plus Ryan Day knew Don Brown. He worked with Don Brown. He had the book on him beyond everyone else, and he had great talent. So could you put the pieces together to have the plan coming out of halftime Because say what you want about Ohio State blowing Michigan out in 18 and 19. Those were games at halftime. Those were one possession or a possession and a half,
and
right?
to add to that, what Michigan did today, what they did against Michigan State, they didn't settle for field goals. They closed those drives out.
Exactly, Josh. And so you had to finish. So that's my point, getting to the finish. So you were leading at halftime. Coming out of the locker room was crucial. How they came out of the locker room was going to tell the tale of this game. Because as I said before, 18 and 19. In 18, it was 24 to 19 at half. In 19, it was 28 to 16 with a drop touchdown pass right before the break. Should have been 28 to 20. And then they came out in the second half, and in both games, Ohio State ran away with it coming out of the locker room. So what do you do, Michigan? In a situation similar, although you're better off this time, how do you make this different? They came out of the break, Josh, got a 3 and out and a 3 and in. 3 and out for the defense, 3 and in for the offense.
Just punch them in the mouth.
Punch them in the mouth. That set the tone the rest of the way. Virtuoso performances by both Mike McDonald, who did a great job of mixing and disguising coverages, bringing pressure when he had to, and Josh Gaddis, who said in the offseason, what do you regret most about last year? He said, I didn't run the football enough. I need to run the football even when people think I shouldn't. And they focused on it in the spring for this moment, to be able to run the football against this team. And when they had to at the end,
they did.
They had to close it out, right? You got to put them down. Don't give them life, put them down. They put them down with the running game.
They didn't stop. They kept going. Ohio State had no answers. Let's keep this going, Sam. You mentioned a little bit about some of the special players. Michigan had 2 unique special players today. And generally, you talk about one player like Woodson, Desmond Howard. Today they had Hassan Haskins and Aiden Hutchinson. Let's talk about each guy. Hassan Haskins had 5 touchdowns today. Tied a single game rushing record for Michigan. But he did it against Ohio State. He had big runs. And I think what sort of signified sort of his game, his season, he did his signature move and put his stamp on this game when he leaped over the Ohio State defender, and then they sealed the win a few plays later. What has Hassan Haskins meant for this team? And what did he mean in this game and him moving forward? And how special was today's performance?
I think it was a career-defining performance. I think Hassan Haskins' career began, and if today was his swan song at Michigan Stadium, he may go to the pros. I think it began and ended with Ohio State. I mean, his moments in a Michigan uniform, his biggest and brightest moments, came against the Buckeyes. First in defeat a couple of years ago when in that game a couple of years ago, I never forget. I remember there was a 3rd and 10 and they had a catch that the receiver ran out of bounds at 9 yards. Guys were mailing it in at the end of the game, Josh. Guys were mailing it in. Here you had this young guy in Hassan Haskins who kept grinding like it was nothing. When the game looked like it was out of hand, he kept running. And so everyone talked about after that game, they ran a pin and pull, and he left his blockers. He got hit on a 4th down, and everyone talked about he didn't follow his blockers. That was not the story. That was not the storyline out of that game. The storyline out of that game was you had a guy who said, get on my back. I'm going to grind no matter the circumstances. You can ride me no matter the odds. That's a guy you can get behind, Josh. So, to me, I knew he would be ready for this game. There was never a doubt about what Hassan Haskins would bring. Just like I said all year long, you knew he could be a bell cow. Whether you're splitting time, a lot of running backs need 20 carries to get warmed up. He's cool, splitting time, or when you need to give him the rock and say, carry us home, Hassan, he could do that too. This dude, say what you want about the measurables. There are guys that have been faster and quicker in Michigan history. This dude should go down as one of the best tailbacks to wear a Michigan uniform. If for no other reason than what he did today, carrying the mail all game long for his team in dominant fashion against Ohio State.
Post-game, Jim Harbaugh mentioned Aiden Hutchinson potentially, and he thinks he should be invited to New York. I think after today's performance, 13 sacks, a Michigan single-season record, and like you've already alluded to, a dominant performance against your biggest rival on the biggest stage. What did he do today, in your opinion, to elaborate on why furthermore on why he needs to go to New York.
You had to balance the equation up front. I mean, I think Michigan's secondary, give them a lot of credit for the makeover. DJ Turner came on strong. I mean, I thought he was Michigan's best corner the second half of the season.
Absolutely.
Vincent Gray had he had a mental makeover. Yeah. What he accomplished this season. And give Steve Clinkscale and Ron Bellamy a ton of credit for instilling some confidence in these guys to come out and rebound from what happened to them last year. But at the end of the day, if you were going to win this game, it came down to what happened up front. And you talk about his stats. He has a sack record. He should have a touchdown that the refs took away from him against Michigan State. You should have two guys who broke the sack record because they stole the sack from David Ojabo. I don't want to dwell on that because that's in the past. But he came out and had 3 sacks on the biggest stage. The Heisman moments happen in the big games. It's not what happens against Maryland. It's not what happens against Indiana. It's the big games. What do you do in the biggest games? And this was at least a Heisman invitation game.
Let's just say it was
for Aiden. Okay,
I'm going to go on a ledge here and say that most watched game in America this year.
Forget that. You don't want to give him the Heisman 5. That's cool. Number 1 overall draft pick. This is the best football player in America. Aiden Hutchinson is the best football player in America. He is a more complete defensive player than Thibodeau. He absolutely is. Run it, Aiden Hutchinson. Run it, Thibodeau. Who you got? I know who I have. Who you got?
And lastly, Sam, we just got to transition. We're 7th in Michigan. Everyone's going to celebrate in Ann Arbor tonight. I probably will too. But you're looking forward to next week. It's probably going to be either Wisconsin or Iowa, unless Wisconsin loses. Just previewing that game and about Michigan not losing focus as they prepare for their West opponent.
Yeah, look, they're human. This was the target. What are you doing to beat Ohio State? They all said it. So I mean, as much as focused as they have been, I do think it requires an adjustment.
They're human
for them. Man.
Young men.
You got to recalibrate and realize that this was just a step in the direction of where you're trying to go, right? And so I think they'll do that. They have great leadership. Aiden Hutchinson, Josh Ross. You look over at the offensive side of the ball. They have great leadership. And Jim Harbaugh. I mean, he is the guy who he doesn't like to talk about the guarantee in back in '86. You know why that guarantee was made? Because they lost focus. They lost focus the game before and lost to Minnesota. I don't know if he'll tell that story, but he said, hey, when you get so caught up in one game, you miss the rest. So Michigan, if they face Wisconsin, it's a different Wisconsin team. See, because Wisconsin, they got in their minds that because they had recruited the best quarterback recruit in the history of Wisconsin, that they needed to be a drop back passing team. Right. Well, you know what they realized? That at Wisconsin, you better go out there and get busy Wisconsining. Because Wisconsining is what got you to Rose Bowls and Big Ten championships. So that's what they did. They said, it doesn't matter who we hand the ball to. They're going to get 1,000 yards or 100 yards a game because we got this big bell cow offensive line, and that's how they're winning games. So this is a different team if it winds up being Wisconsin that Michigan will face if it winds up being Iowa. How many problems has Michigan had with Iowa over the years? We look back at 2016.
Yeah, I was there. They lost.
I'm telling you, that Iowa game, maybe even more so than the Ohio State game, cost Michigan the playoffs. Because if they just don't lose Wilton Spate in that Iowa game, they lost the game and they got Wilton Spate hurt. That got them beat against Ohio State. It cost them in the bowl game too. So Iowa gives them problems. Whoever they face in the Big Ten championship game is not going to be a pushover. But you know what you got to feel confident about? You can pack your running game if you're Michigan. You know that. You're going to be able to run the rock. You can pack that. You can pack your defense. You got the best defensive end tandem in the country. That travels as well. And you got to be feeling really confident about what Mike McDonald brings to the fold as a defensive coordinator, his defensive makeover this year, and Josh Gaddis for all of the criticism and the ridicule that has come out about the kind of games that he called this year. It was an outstanding year. He well deserving of the Broyles Award nomination for the offensive makeover for this team, catering his game plan to the talent that's on the squad, pounding teams with the running game, and bringing his quarterbacks along. Because I tell you what, in the passing game, he's been scheming guys open all season long. But realize, look, can't get too caught up in that. just because I'm calling pass plays with guys open doesn't mean I got to keep calling them. We got to run this rock. And that's what he did. That's a reason why, one of the reasons why Michigan is in the Big Ten title game, but the biggest and most significant is Jim Harbaugh. This is Jim Harbaugh, man. This is Jim Harbaugh looking in the mirror and saying, I got to make some changes. I got to wipe the slate with my defensive staff. I got to make some changes on offense that people are going to be like, wait, are you getting rid of a veteran offensive line coach? Like Ed Warner for a guy who's never coached offensive line like Sherrone Moore, and you think that's going to work? Yeah, I think that's going to work because he played offensive line, great chemistry with Gaddis. They know the scheme. They got great chemistry. And then I'm going to bring in Mike Hart to work with my running backs.
Right.
Josh, he made the right moves in the offseason to put his team in position to come back. If his name wasn't Jim Harbaugh, more people would be talking about him in Coach of the Year conversations, but he absolutely should be in that conversation. I think Jim Harbaugh is the Big Ten Coach of the Year.
Well, if he wins next week, I think he will be in that National Coach of the Year conversation. For Sam Webb, I'm Josh Newkirk. Stay tuned for all our coverage and more on the MichiganInsider.com.